Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Jan Szrewiński. In the Baltic States, there is a constant sense of urgency about preparing for potential military adventurism by Moscow. Latvia has just completed a 280-kilometer-long metal fence to block illegal migrants funneled into Europe by the Lukashenko regime, while Lithuania prepares to blow up bridges leading into Belarus in the event of an enemy attack. At the same time, Estonian intelligence urges calm over potential Russian attacks, suggesting that so far deterrence seems to be working. So how can the Baltic states weather the geopolitical storm and protect their growth and prosperity despite the looming threat from the Kremlin? Joining us now is Artis Pabriks, former Latvian defense and foreign minister. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning and Happy New Year, timely.
And Happy New Year to you as well, sir. So let's begin with the measures that are being introduced by the Baltic states recently, such as, for example, the fence on the Latvian border. What do they tell us about the degree of preparedness that these resilient societies are maintaining in the face of a potential aggression from the Kremlin?
Well, our estimate in the Baltic states is that no matter how will proceed so-called peace negotiations with Ukraine and Russia and the war, Russia will continue to constitute a danger for our whole region, not only Baltic states, but also Finland and Poland and other countries. And since we have been also the target of organized migration hybrid attacks already for years, then this fence was one of the first things which was initiated by our government. It is now fully completed on the border with Belarus and with Russia, with both countries. It will be equipped also with modern technologies to detect all the possible threats. Of course, this fence is not a military infrastructure. By telling this, I also would like to remind that in all three Baltic states there is ongoing military constructions to the eastern part of border, which I some time ago called something similar like Mannerheim Line in Finland before the Second World War. So basically the final point is we do not want to take any chances. We do not want to be any time again facing Russian or Soviet occupation, because our history is just as bitter as Polish history. And that means we will do what we need to do to protect our countries.
So it's about preparedness, but also maintaining the right state of mind, right? You've mentioned Finland. Now, I would like to actually quote a few words from the country's President Alexander Stubb, who said, and I'm basically, and I quote, "I'm a little concerned about these rather aggressive statements about Russia intending to test NATO's Article 5 and that Europe is next in line. We should prepare for this, but it's doubtful. I call on all European countries to become more Finnish. In other words, to be prepared. You need to have been prepared for the worst to avoid this." Do you think this is actually the right mindset, this sort of quiet resilience, readiness for the worst, but also hoping for the best?
Definitely, because we always have to hope for the better outcome, but at the same time, the biggest mistakes of many politicians is that they are living in illusion that bad things happen somewhere else but not with us. And this is not the right thing. We always should be ready for the worst. And I think the biggest European problem is also why Europe is not, for instance, now fully engaged in so-called, and I stress here, so-called peace talks, is because Europe is not taking the right steps and it's not showing what it is capable of. And the big difference exists still between hearts and minds in several Western European countries and countries which are very close to the Russian border, like ours. So simply Western European countries are still not feeling that the danger might happen and something might happen bad to them. And this is where we have to really work with them to create this mindset.
Now, do you think that there is a risk of overdoing this when it comes to essentially telling societies how to react to these challenges? In some Western European countries, there has been this complete turnaround. Like the governments used to say, oh, Russia is a normal country, they can actually be a reliable partner. Right now, there is talk of imminent conflict, possibly even within 2 years' time. Do you think this runs a risk of essentially turning it up a bit too much, so that, you know, populist parties could then say, why do we want to spend so much money on the military? We don't need that. We're going to make peace with Russia. I mean, they're already doing this, right? So what would you say from your experience, you know, from the Baltic States, how to maintain this balance between readiness and, you know, the avoidance of panic?
Well, yes, precisely. This is a question how much salt you add to the soup. And it depends very much on also historic understanding and political situation in each of the countries, because strategic communication with society is highly important. But you have to find the right balance where you are not creating a panic, but at the same time you are not also allowing the society to sleep over and not to be ready for any kind of dangers. And there is probably not a one single kind of formula, like for a cocktail, for every country. You have to look how the societies in each country is looking at this. In Latvian case or in Baltic case, I think it is important, and we know how to do this with our society, I believe, because we do have this specific situations what our society were going on during Soviet occupation and Second World War, so not to repeat those mistakes. But I would believe that in such countries as France or Germany or Belgium, there should be a different approach. But my experience shows that still many people and many groups in those countries are not really ready to grasp the seriousness of the situation. Because Europe has been disarming, Europe has been neglecting military parts, they have been just living at the expense of sometimes United States or just good hopes for decades. And you cannot safeguard our continent if you continue such type of attitude.
So countries like Poland, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania are leading the way when it comes to rearmament. There has recently been a very clear signal from Latvia, for example, that if Russia chooses to behave aggressively, the response to that is definitely going to be, you know, not just clashes at the border, but also deep strikes into Russian territory. Do you think that this is the right signal, a signal that Russia will understand, especially given that they are already facing the reality of deep strikes from Ukrainians today?
Well, this is the only way. We must have all types of weaponry. I believe that even if Baltic states are a small countries, we must have enough of capabilities, not only to shoot down drones which could fly in our sky, but also to strike those places where these drones are either produced or where they are starting their flights. And that means that in future, we need to have a long reach drones in our own armies. We must have also ballistic missiles, and this is not anything what we anymore dream about. This is a bitter reality. There must be plans to respond to any kind of aggressiveness, not only in our territory, not to bomb, let's say, invaders in Latvian or Estonian territory, but to bomb where they are coming from. And this is also the old Finnish approach.
So this is the essence of deterrence, right? I mean, you're maintaining strength which the enemy has to reckon with, and they cannot ignore the fact that they will face consequences. What do you think should Europe do in order to enhance its deterrence? Can you name any sort of component that is still lacking? Like, for example, long-range missiles that we've already mentioned. Should we have more of these with greater range, like the Tomahawk, for example, so about 2,000 kilometers instead of the roughly 300 to 500 that the ATACMS have?
I would not concentrate here only on the military part, because there are a lot of type of weapons which are developed and developing, and also the war experience in Ukraine actually makes us to adjust to this. My biggest concern is not the industry in this case, because industry will be ready to produce if government will decide. I would say that biggest challenge up to today is still the lack of the right mindset in European political corridors, because we failed to take over these 200 billion of frozen Russian money in mostly Belgian banks. We are still hoping, I mean, some are still hoping to make trade deals with Russia in future. We cannot stop their ships. So it's a question of attitude. It's not just a question of capabilities. And this is what I would wish for the next year for all European politicians. Change your mindset and be ready.
Artis Pabriks was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you.
And I'm Anash Ravinsky. You're watching TVP World. Please stay with us for more latest news and updates.